Assalamualaikum warahmatullah guys. Welcome back to our analysis of Islamic banking behavior under the two period of economic instability, that is inflation and unemployment. Inflation and recession. We can start with inflation as the global economy now is under the pressure of inflation. And thus, we will be able to see what are the policy pursued by the regulators in order to contain inflation, and how would commercial bank be reacting towards this counter-cyclical policy of central banking. But first, we must remind ourselves with regards to the Quranic injunction with regards to the prohibition of riba. Allah says in the Quran, Surah Baqarah, verse 275, وَأَهَلَ اللَّهُ الْبَيْءَ وَحَرَمُ riba, that Allah has permitted al-bay' and prohibit riba. So that can easily mean that riba is exploitation, which is evil, and al-bay' is cooperation, which is good. You know that riba is unjust, al-bay' is just, the opposite. And thus, when we are looking at any effort to introduce al-bay' in the banking business, whether in the form of policy or in the form of product offering, the implication must be good. The implication must be must be just, where morality can be made visible, and it should not be able, it should not mirror the so-called evil of riba that is plaguing conventional banking today. We can see that if you follow the development in US and Europe with regards to the banking failure and the various mistake by central banking in pursuing the appropriate monetary policy to combat inflation, we will see that the impact of policymakers, because policymakers are here to promote public interest. So the central bank comes in to pursue a counter-cyclical policy, that is to contain the inflation. And that is done in order to protect the interests of the people, because inflation will be eating up our money, where our purchasing power will no longer be good enough, to purchase food and basic necessities, and inflation will increase cost of doing business, and that will reduce corporate earning, and eventually may cause a collapse in the stock market. So that is why it's very serious to contain inflation, to put it down, and the counter cyclical policy is to reduce the money supply, because by reducing the money supply, demand will fall, consumption and investment will fall, and this will pull down prices. So that is the plan on the table to ensure that there is some contraction of money supply to pull down the excess demand. But then what we see here, what would be the reaction from the conventional bank or from the commercial bank? Number one, during inflation, the top priority of banking business is to make money, right? So the profitability objective is top when the economy is booming and under inflationary pressure. So even though the effort of the central bank is to cut down the money supply, maybe by increasing the reserve requirement or by issuing more securities so that they can, they can mop up the money supply, so that bank will buy the securities and therefore they have less money to make loans. But then what happened here is whatever that the central bank will do, the bank will find the best way to make loan, and one of which is to sell their securities, right? So they will sell their bonds holding and securities holding for cash, so that this cash can be used to make more loans, because loans are the most profitable asset during inflation. Because during inflation, and these are good times, people have money, people have the capacity to pay loans. The fact that loan will fall into default is quite remote during these times of economic prosperity, and therefore the bank will find every way, to convert their low yielding asset into a higher yielding asset. And that is what the bank will do, that they will sell their bond holding to in order to get hold of more excess reserve, so that they can make more and more loans, and thus make more profit from that asset portfolio. So this will make the inflation even worse, and thus, so this pro-cyclical policy of the conventional bank would be frustrating the counter-cyclical policy of the central bank, and this is what we would not want to see in any economy where there is a clash, of policy between, financial institution. One institution is promoting public interest, and the other one, the commercial bank, is promoting private interest, and they are the agenda are clashing, and this is something that is not likely to produce justice in the economic in the economy. Likewise, when we look at the Islamic bank being Sharia compliant, but they were unfortunately set up as a commercial bank where funding are derived from borrowing, quote unquote, meaning that funding is coming from the depositors. The depositors provided funds to the Islamic bank, where this fund must be return on call, just like the deposit fund we found in conventional banking. So the deposit fund is a debt that the bank owe the depositors, and therefore when the bank make murabaha, then the bank must make sure that this murabaha are good murabaha, so as to prevent any possible default, because by using leverage, the bank need to support the murabaha with adequate capital, and thus this would restrict the Islamic bank from diversifying their asset portfolio. So the only portfolio the only instrument that they can use are the debt instrument, such as murabaha and tawarruk, but they are not able to use the equity instrument because of the high capital charges accorded to this traditional contract. So by making more and more murabaha from the sale of sukuk, the bank will make more murabaha, and that will further increase the money supply. That will contra the effort of the central bank, that is to reduce the money supply. So the Islamic bank is also now acting like a conventional bank, despite that they are driven by al-bay', but the Islamic bank are making the inflation situation even worse. And so this pro-cyclical policy of the Islamic bank are meant to champion the private interests, the interests of the shareholders, but this will go against
the public interest policy of central banking, which is to cut down the money supply. So what we will see here that, that the behavior of the Islamic bank seems to be similar to the behavior of the conventional bank when we are looking at this example of counter-cyclical behavior versus pro-cyclical behavior. And so we need to ponder upon, the Quran, that the verse before the verse that permitted al-bay' and prohibit riba, that is the verse that says wa ahalallahu al-bay' wa haramu riba, that God has permitted al-bay' and prohibit riba. But the verse prior to that is innamal bay'u mithlu riba, that the mushrikun were claiming that al-bay' is similar to riba. You see, so this claim, of making riba and al-bay' equivalent, we can see that equivalent, it seems to be visible today when we look at this procyclical policy and behavior of conventional banking and the deposit-taking Islamic bank. Because the deposit-taking Islamic bank are not the ideal bank that should be set up, because it is a highly leveraged bank which is equivalent to the conventional banking, which is highly leveraged, and therefore they are heavily regulated by the Basel Committee, and thus that similarity, is visible and glaring. And thus that is why I was saying that the current commercial banking, the current deposit-taking Islamic bank, should be overhauled, such that the funding structure will be reformed, will be restructured in such a way that the Islamic bank is no longer depending on leverage fund to make murabaha, but we should be relying on the investment fund to undertake whatever possible contract that the Sharia has offered. So by using investment account fund, then the Islamic bank would be able to use mudarabah, musyarakah, salam, istisna, real sale, real leasing, and that policy, that portfolio would be rich in real sector transaction that will somehow, in a period of inflation or recession, would be able to post different results, compared to what we find under conventional banking today, as well as under the prevailing deposit-taking bank, which I presume is not working well, to fight the evil of riba. We can discuss further the issue, inshallah. I hope that you will make some comment, and please subscribe. I'll see you again when we discuss the economic period under recession. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi.